Hi, so today I'm going to show you how to install the ARB Differential Air Breather kit on a 5th gen Toyota 4Runner. Here's the box it came in. I ordered this off Amazon for about $75 with free shipping. Let's take a look at what's inside. Okay, so I already took this apart and have been working on it, but basically you have your manifold here, the breather itself. There's some little screws, elements that you put in the side here into the openings that you're not going to be using. I'm only going to be using one breather for the rear differential axle on the 5th gen Toyota 4Runner. All the other breathers on everything else have been installed factory and are high enough above water levels that you don't need to alter them. So just for the rear. And so that opening I'm going to use. You have some other fittings here. I'm sure you'll figure out what they're for. And then they give you a bag of zip ties to follow the line and zip them out of the way. As you can see, there's no really great instructions that come with this. This is about all you get. So using online YouTube videos is helpful. Okay, as far as tools, I believe uninstalling the old breather, you can use a 14mm. That worked. And if you want to cut the line, what you're going to have to do, because it's probably going to be too long, I just got a pair of wire cutters here, another pair of cutters, and then for the 4Runner you need to, it's a lot easier if you drop the tire, so I have a screwdriver here to do the little tire thing, tire wrench, take out the tire. You just stick this baby in the hole down here, stick it in and turn it, and that'll release your spare tire and get it out of the way. Here you can see the old differential breather, which they talk about on other videos, how it functions. And here's the new one that you're going to be installing, and that's where the tube goes in. It's kind of like a Sharkbite fitting. People say that you only get one chance. Once you stick the tube in, you can't get it back out. What I've found is if you press on this black part here and then pull the tube out, you can actually get it back out if you screw up. So that's useful information to have, because I screwed up the first time. Basically because someone has told me to put more Teflon tape on here when I screw it back in. So I'm going to go ahead and put more Teflon tape on there and then put a new fitting in there. Get rid of the one I already put in because I may have screwed it up. Anyway, so a little more Teflon tape, and then I'll show you how to I'll show you where this breather is, where we take it out, and where to install the new one in its place. So one of the things I forgot to mention is these little doohickeys here that you put in the holes that you're not using in the manifold. You don't want to tighten them too much, but you do want them tight. There's a little rubber gasket. I only saw one video online that tells you to use a hex. It's probably easy to figure out, but get yourself a hex key and you can tighten that up a little bit when you get to the point of installing this. That's just good information to have, just to get it tight so they don't rattle out when you're riding off-road. Okay, what I'm going to show you right now is like I said, where we're going to install the these little jobbers here, diff breathers. So let's get to that so you can see where that's all at. And like I said, drop the tire. That'll give you a ton more access. Some people say you need to jack up your vehicle. I found that that's not really necessary. I have stock wheels on. There's plenty of room to move around under there and see things. So let me show you where that's at. Okay, so as you approach the rear of the car, go under here, you can see how much room there is here. There's the chain that was holding the tire. There's the tire. Look at that. You know, you get that out of the way, you got a ton more space back here to deal with. And as you can see right there, that silver piece, that's where the old differential breather is, and I took it out, and that's the new one. So remember the two breathers that I showed you, the old one with the cap and the new one that the tube goes into, that's where it goes, right there on the axle. It's that line coming straight up. So I've already installed it, but that's the one I'm going to remove and replace with the little breather that I put more Teflon on, because the extra Teflon will create a better seal and keep water out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, but I'm not going to show you how to do that because you guys know how to unscrew a bolt with a 14mm wrench. That's pretty easy to do. The other thing is I saw a guy saying that you need to install that with 30 pounds of force, and I may have not done 30 pounds. But there it is right there. There's a close-up of it. Right here. You can see that 14mm nut that you screw on right there. And this is the tube. That's the Sharkbite fitting. And as I said, if you push down on that plastic ring and pull out on the tube at the same time, it releases the Sharkbite in case you screw up. And I also wanted to let you know that it really does help, as you can see here, to have a headlamp. You probably already know that, but it's just helpful to have a headlamp so you can see what you're doing. I also have a hand flashlight, little hand flashlight that I use for extra lighting, and of course you can use lighting of your choice. Probably be better to have another stationary light, just so you don't so it doesn't get in the way. Okay, I don't know if you can see it, but I removed the breather there, and there's the hole that it screws into. And it's probably important to mention that you want to make sure you clean this area thoroughly before you remove the breather, so that when you're working there, no debris gets in there. Now, my vehicle's pretty new. It only has 800 miles on it, so it's still pretty clean, but even dust and stuff, you don't really want to. You want to minimize what you get inside there, any contaminants, for obvious reasons. Okay, so I removed the original fitting that I put in here. Here's the stock breather with the cap on top. And here are the two aftermarket ARB breathers. The breathers do come with a little bit of Teflon. I'll show you here. So this is what it comes with when you buy the ARB. That's the Teflon they put in factory. This is the one I screwed in. You can see some of the Teflon's already come off. Hopefully it's not going to fall in the differential there. And then this is the aftermarket ARB breather that I added Teflon to. So you can see the difference here. This is what they give you from ARB, not very much. I put an extra on here, so hopefully that'll seal it really well. I didn't see any Teflon on the factory breather, so I'm not sure if they just didn't put any on or if it just wore out. It's kind of hard to believe that it would have worn out through shipping and 800 miles of driving. So maybe they don't put any on there. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's overkill, but better be safe than sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and install this one now, and then push the tube back into that fitting, and then we'll talk about tube routing after that. Okay, so I'm back into the car. I got the fitting here, and I'm going to attempt to screw it in here. And I'm going to route this thing up to the engine bay like some people do. Some people route it into the cabin, into the tool area, which I don't like the idea of. They say that you're not going to get any smell, but not only do I smell some of the oil in the case here when I remove this, I can actually smell it, but the fact of cutting a waterproof membrane to install this inside, I don't like either one of those things. I don't want to cut the membrane. I know you can seal it with silicone or something like that, but I don't really want to mess with that. And then secondly, if there is any smell, I don't want it inside the cabin. If there isn't, no big deal, but if there is, I don't want to take the chance and then breathe that in when I'm sleeping in there or whatever, because I will be camping in the back of my 4Runner. So I'm going to get the 14mm wrench and tighten this up, and then I'll put the tube in, and then we'll talk about running the tube, where to run it. Okay, I just installed the new breather there. You can see it right here. And the tube's coming up, straight up. I'm going to turn this a little sideways, and you can see I put a big loop in that line, because you want to make sure in the back especially here that that line is long enough to where when your axle articulates to its fullest length that you have enough line to stretch and follow that articulation. Because if you don't, then that hose is just going to probably get yanked right out of that Sharkbite fitting there. So make sure you have enough extra line here. They give you plenty of line, so make sure you have enough in there. Make sure it's curved and flexible to the point where it won't bind or crimp. A lot of guys will jack up their vehicles when they're doing this so that they can see how much line they need. I'm just kind of estimating it, and hopefully that'll be good enough. Okay, so I'm running that line. You can see these existing lines running here. What you want to do is follow some existing lines up to the engine bay, if that's where you're going to be putting your manifold, your breather manifold, and then zip tie them occasionally to these lines on the way up so that that line is secured and doesn't flop around or fall down. And you can follow any lines all the way up to the engine bay. The key really is to just try to avoid the exhaust or any areas where it's going to get excessively hot. Now the line that ARB gives you does withstand extreme cold and extreme heat, but it's so just make sure when you run it, you're behind the heat shield and not exposed. You can see the heat shield right down there. That's a heat shield. Mine goes up and under that and then follows an electrical line up to the engine bay. Various people follow different routes. I mean, you could probably even run the line through the frame of your car if you wanted to. Depends on how much work you want to do. I'm just following an existing electrical line and then zip tying. So follow your own path, as your parents probably used to tell you. Follow your own path. And next we'll be looking into the engine bay. Okay, one thing I would do if I were you, on your first zip tie that's going to be back by the differential, if I can get a light on in here. See the zip tie there? Okay, you see how I don't have it tight. There's a pretty big loop in it. It's going to keep that line right here from flopping around. You see the zip tie in the line. So this is the line that I tied the existing lines. I left the back one loose so that this can freely move back and forth when your axle articulates. The rest of the zip ties can be tighter, but this one close to the axle you want to be a pretty big loop so it can move freely when you're off-roading and that axle articulates, and this line can extend and retract, and this won't bind it up. The zip tie won't bind it up. So keep that back one loose and then cut off the excess of your zip tie there if you want. I guess you don't have to, but I did. That's it. Okay, you can see my line here. See if this will work. So back here I ran it above the heat shield. There's the muffler, so you can see where the heat could be extreme. And then I connected up to this electrical line here, and I'm just going to follow this electrical line here and zip tie it to that. And here's one of the zip ties right here. And I didn't super tighten it, but I did leave it a little loose so it can go back and forth. But you want these to be a little tighter because you don't want this line to flop down anywhere near the heat here, because here's the heat shield, but you can see the muffler here, and that line gets so hot you want your line to be protected here. So I'm just going to follow this electrical line, which runs all the way up into the engine compartment, and zip tie it to that in a few places. Okay, now in the engine compartment, I've run the line up. You can see the excess line here. There's a lot of it. A lot of excess line. You can see where it comes up right here, and you can see the exhaust right there. So it's pretty clear out of the way coming up right down here. It's far enough away the heat shouldn't be a problem. So when the line comes up, we're going to cut it and then attach it to the manifold. Now the manifold's not too big, so there's a lot of places you could put it, mount it, and get it out of the way. What I'd like to show you is what I've decided to do here, where I want to put mine. Now, here's your air filter. Now I've seen Ant-Man on one of the forums. He's got an air compressor here, and I want to say his second battery's over here. I'm not sure how he got it over here, but if you're going to put a second battery, or a air compressor here, that's a nice spot to put it. And this is where I'm going to put my breather, but obviously it could be in the way if I decide to put a second battery or air compressor here. So I'll want to put it somewhere where it's not going to interfere in the future. And you can see this thing's pretty small, so we can stick it almost anywhere. You can even put it up against the firewall. But a lot of guys, what they're doing, they're putting it right over here. Right on this side. It's a nice big open space, but if you do put in a second battery setup, you know, you're going to have wires running along here to go to your second battery, whether your second battery's here or over there on the other side as I showed. But then you're going to have to put a solenoid, which is a pretty big unit, for the two batteries, so that the solenoid will shut off one battery when not needed and then turn it back on. It's like a relay. So this whole area here could be for the fuse and then the solenoid relay, which I guess would still leave you room for the ARB breather. I've also seen in some other vehicles they installed it back here on the firewall. So it's really kind of up to you where you install it. All I would recommend is that you put a little thought into it and install it somewhere where, should you make any future modifications, it doesn't get in the way. Okay, so they do provide you with two self-tapping screws. My suggestion, that's to install the manifold. My suggestion is to pre-drill a little bit, get it started, and make it a lot easier for these to self-tap. Okay, where I'm going to install mine, my breather, is the line comes up here, so I'm going to install it. Here's this wiring harness. I pulled it out of the opening there, which kind of ruins the plastic grommet, but I'm going to stick it back in there. I'm going to put this breather right down here. And it's going to be out of the way for any future projects, and it should function well. It's high enough in the engine compartment. So I'm going to take this filter off here, and what I like to do is hold it up to where I'm going to put it and take a nail punch. You see it goes through there, and hold it there, and then just tap on each side to make my marks where I'm going to pre-drill for my self-tapping screws. Okay, so now before we install this, make sure you tighten these up and then install your part your hose goes into. You probably don't need extra Teflon on this one, simply because it's out of the way, not going to get wet. So make sure you install these and tighten them up. Just hand tighten before you screw this in to your engine compartment. It's just going to be a lot easier to tighten these up. And then once you install the manifold, you screw the filter on here, and then you're done. Okay, so down in this area here, you can see where the line still follows this electrical here. Here's the line. And I put one zip tie down here. And it kind of follows the contour of that. And I ran it underneath this here in an X to hold it in place a little bit. And you can see it runs right up into the manifold there. And what we'll do is we'll screw on the ARB filter. That hand tighten. And there it is. Job well done. Good luck with your project.